What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of GR4 Sportsbar, your one-stop shop for beer reviews, drink reviews of any kind, and sports talk with yours truly, King George 94 on Twitter. If you guys are looking for any other content with myself and any of my buddies, head on over to TBQ Sports on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. And also, don't forget to check out the GR4 Sportsbar TikTok. And today, we're going to be talking about something that is probably a little different. Something a lot of you guys probably aren't 100% in on or follow all that much. And that's going to be the wild and interesting world of Formula One. It is the summer break for F1. And if you guys are looking for any easy way to get into it, I highly recommend it. They don't need my recommendation. They don't need my support. This is not sponsored by any means. Go watch Drive to Survive on Netflix. It's just a ton of fun. And we are going to be getting in on close enough to what an F1 driver would be drinking after winning a race. And that, of course, is champagne. I don't have a bottle of champagne, but what I do have is, of course, the champagne of beers, Miller High Life. We're going to crack this open. This is, I suppose to some people, notoriously an old man beer, kind of like Coors Banquet, but we're not going to pour this in a glass. It's already in a glass, that nice kind of pale gold color. I mean, honestly, it's just classic. It's an OG. It's just solid. It's just a decent beer. I can't complain. I can't sit here and be like, oh, the flavor, the malty. No, it's just a classic American style beer. It just is what it is. I don't mind it. I'm gonna keep drinking it. It's pretty good. That's all I can really say. I mean, it's right down the middle. It is, it's smooth. It doesn't have, a ton of flavor. It's not brewed with, anything specific, anything crazy, anything weird, like a lot of these, more craft beers are, But, I mean, I can't complain. I've got it. I'm going to keep drinking it like I'm an F1 champion. And if I have to give that one a rating out of 10, just solid, pretty close to the middle. I'd give it like a 4.6 out of 10. Can't really go wrong. With that in mind, we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to try something kind of fun with this episode. Well, I'm going to give you guys something to look at other than, this beautiful face right here. We're going to be doing a Formula One team tier list. As you guys can see right here, top to bottom, we've got S, A, B, C, D, and here are our F1 teams. And we're going to be doing this based off of kind of the perception of the team, where they should be, and how this season is actually going for them. So we're not going to be, and of course, I'll be giving a little bit of a breakdown for each one as we go through them. I feel like it's just easiest to go with the front runners. Obviously, your S tier, your champion right now, Red Bull Racing, led by, lead driver Max Verstappen, who has won, I think, 8 races in a row at this point. He's just driving like a man amongst boys. It also doesn't help that they have the best car, the best driver. They've won every single race weekend thus far, every single sprint as well. So they are just on an absolute tear. Their secondary driver, Sergio Perez, Checo's his nickname, had a pretty hot start, was keeping pace with Max when it came to the points they were getting, and just won a couple races early on in the season, but he has had a pretty sharp decline kind of midway through the first half of the season, and since then has had a bit of a resurgence, 2 podiums in a row now for Perez. Red Bull, they're just running away with it. I mean, it's just not close at all. It really isn't. Like I said, from here, I just felt like it would probably be easiest to knock that one out, get that one out of the way. From here, we're going to go through it just as they've got it listed out here on the screen. So next we have Aston Martin, and this is going to be a weird one. Aston, I am also going to be putting in S tier for this season so far. They, up until this season and, a little bit last season where they had the retirement of Sebastian Vettel. Vettel, legendary F1 driver throughout his career, ended up retiring from F1 last year with Aston Martin. He's no longer there, so Aston Martin went out and brought in Fernando Alonso, a two-time World Driver Championship winner. Going into this season, the expectations were that they would be probably pretty mid-table, which as of right now, they're kind of slotting in like that, but they had a ton of early season success that nobody was expecting. Fernando Alonso was P3, third place, that is, on the podium, plenty of times throughout the beginning half of the season. His secondary driver, I guess Fernando at this point, the secondary driver and one of the resident Nepo babies on the grid, Lance Stroll, has been solid. He's been very decent. He has been, I guess, to an extent, what they expect out of Lance Stroll. And why I say Nepo baby for him, a lot of people don't think he should really be on the grid as a driver right now, but his dad, Lawrence Stroll, owns the team. Yeah, his dad, Lance Stroll, or Lance Stroll's father, Lawrence Stroll, owns the Aston Martin F1 team. So, I'll drink to that, and I'll drink to Lance Stroll continuing to be on the grid, backing up Fernando Alonso through the rest of the season. For me, Aston Martin, I put them up there truly as one of the biggest surprises of the season. They have had a couple issues here and there, like, for example, this last weekend at the Belgium Grand Prix, in the sprint qualifying, Fernando Alonso crashed out of the sprint qualifying, ended up not qualifying too well for the sprint race itself, and therefore did not perform so great at the sprint race. But overall, as the season goes, this case, S is for surprise, S is for shock. Not a lot of people really looked at this Aston Martin and said, man, they're going to do it big. They're going to do it big this season. They're going to surprise a lot of people. Next up, down here, we've got AlphaTauri. So, as you guys can probably see, there's a little Red Bull, little logo in the T, I guess you could say, of AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri is Red Bull Racing's junior team, their secondary team. And honestly, I'm going to put them in D tier. They only have a handful of points throughout the season. There's not a lot to really be excited about except for their lead driver, Yuki Tsunoda, the only Japanese driver on the grid who, even at the age of 23, he's been in F1 for a good couple years now. But the AlphaTauri car, it's horrible. It is arguably one of the slowest cars on the grid. He struggles to get into the top 10, into the points every single week. And honestly, they have also had some of the biggest drama off track out of everyone else on the grid, and that is saying something, which we're going to get into with some of the other constructors on here. They went into the season with Yuki Tsunoda, backed up by 28-year-old rookie Nick De Vries, who at this point, at the beginning of the season, I should say, at that point had already been a Formula E, which is the Formula Electric champion, and the Formula 2 champion. And he comes in and stinks. He is horrible. He is no good. He is not a good secondary driver. Is miles off the pace, and miles off the pace of Yuki Tsunoda. So AlphaTauri, within, 7 or 8 races, decides this is not working. We have to do something about this. They fire Nick De Vries. The rookie is already off the grid, and they bring in fan favorite and Red Bull third driver, Daniel Ricciardo, who immediately steps in and shows that this AlphaTauri, the car itself has a little bit more pace, a little bit more juice to it, but it still really isn't much. Ricciardo's second race was this past weekend at the Belgium Grand Prix, and he struggled, to say the least. Qualified P19, did not finish the race doing all that well. At least he did finish, unlike 2 of the other drivers in the Belgium Grand Prix, but I'm giving AlphaTauri a D. Honestly, the car isn't very good. I think the two drivers are making the car look better than it actually is, and that's saying something because it is not a very good car at all. Next up on here, we have Williams Racing. Williams is a historic team that in the 2000s and 2010s and beyonds have certainly had their struggles. Based on how this season is going, I'm gonna put them in C. I'm torn between C and D. No matter what, I think they're above AlphaTauri. Williams Racing, their current drivers are Alexander Albon, formerly of Red Bull Racing, and AlphaTauri when it used to be Toro Rosso, and American rookie Logan Sargent. Logan Sargent yet to finish a race in the points, but we can consistently see growth from him. I want to say his highest finish is P11, which is just one place outside the points, and whereas Albon, on the other hand, is making the car look a lot better than it is. This is a car that, although it has a lot of pace on the straights, a lot of straight line speed, it really, really struggles when it comes to the corners and a lot of the turns where this car does not have a ton of downforce. It really isn't generating a lot, and the floor of it is just so blah, which we saw whenever they had to lift up. I want to say it was Logan Sargent's car a couple weeks ago. Just the floor of the car, the bottom of it, where you generate a lot of that downforce, it's just barren. There is nothing going on down there. Lack of sophistication where, you can understand now why the car struggles so much. But I think they're on the right track. I will say this with Williams, what is giving me some hope and why they're not, bottom of the barrel, even though it has been a rough stretch of it, a rough go of it, I should say, for them so far. I love Alex Albon. He's under contract for a couple years now. I think he is he is already a great driver, a great defensive driver as well. There were a couple races where he would end up, in around P6, P7, and just defend for his life and end up staying in the points for the end of the race. And Logan Sargent has shown progression, unlike Nick DeVries, where with DeVries and AlphaTauri, you look at the situation and say, okay, he's already 28, he has a ton of experience at the lower levels, and we're not seeing a lot of progression. We're not seeing a lot of growth, whereas with Logan Sargent, that's not the case. We're seeing the growth. We're seeing where he's getting better and he's improving. That, and I like Williams' new team principal, Voles. Can't remember his first name. I think it's Tom, but Voles is for sure his last name. They took him from Mercedes, if I remember correctly, and I think he has this team on the right track. Next, we have Alfa Romeo Racing / Sauber, or Orlen, however you want to put it. I'm going to put them in D tier. I like both their drivers. Valtteri Bottas is a true veteran. He's been in the sport for a long time. Drove for Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton during all those, winning seasons. And I like him, and I like Zhou Guanyu, who is in, I want to say, either his second or his third year in Formula One. That said, the car itself is not very good, and there's a lot of behind the scenes things going on with the team itself that give a little bit of caution with trying to invest in the team long term. In 2026, I think it's 2026, could be wrong on that, there's going to be new regulations for Formula One coming out, and there's going to be a lot of changes between constructors and engine producers, a lot of change going on. And Alfa Romeo is currently paired up with Sauber. At that point, Sauber plans to break off from Alfa Romeo and go with Audi. Now, that isn't to say Alfa Romeo builds the engine. They don't. They source their engine. It is just branded as Alfa Romeo Racing. There are a lot of question marks with that going forward, and the potential that we might see Alfa Romeo team up with Haas, another team on the grid, wherein it goes to Sauber and Audi. There's just a ton going on in the background there, and it's not like they're getting a ton of results. It isn't as though we're seeing a team where they're consistently in the points when, with all this adversity. Truly, there isn't. There's not a lot going on there, except for a lot of confusion and a lot of poor finishes. All right, next we've got Alpine. Now, I did say this is going to be set for the mid-season break, which is why I'm going to put them in C tier. Above Williams, but still in C tier. And this is going to be another one where there is just a lot of question marks going on with this team. You got two good drivers in Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, who consistently outperform their vehicle, outperform their car, except when they crash into each other. We've seen that more than once this season. I want to say it was at Australia and in Hungary. They crashed into each other, or there was something where they both impacted each other and put them both out of the race, which is just truly astounding. You never expect to see that from two teammates multiple times in a season. It's absolutely wild. And why I have them in C tier, two things. One, the car. The car itself is extremely underpowered. And we're seeing that come to light, now, where supposedly the Alpine engine, the Renault engine, has 30 less horsepower than the majority of the rest of the grid, which that is astounding. That is a huge discrepancy between these teams, because 30 horsepower, when we're talking about cars that need to be engineered and designed to the highest standard, to the highest level, 30 horsepower is a lot. It's crazy to see that this vehicle is that much underpowered, and then to see these two drivers get this much out of this car. The other main reason I have them in C tier instead of probably a little bit higher is the news from this past week, I should say. Laurent Rossi, the CEO of the team of Renault Alpine, gone. Just like, and as with that, you also had the firing of their race director and their team principal, Otmar Safnauer, who, again, if you've watched Drive to Survive, a legend. Love that guy. He's so much fun. He brings a lot of levity and a lot of joy to his work. But both of those guys, gone. Meaning there's a lot of question marks. They don't have a team principal probably for the rest of the season, or at least, they might have an interim coming out of the summer break. But it's just with that, the behind the scenes there is an absolute mess. It's a nightmare. Moving along to the only American team, and that is Haas. Haas Racing, I'm going to put them in D tier, but I'm going to put them at the top of D tier. I love their team principal. I love Gunter Steiner. He's a ton of fun. He really brings a lot of joy and a lot of love, clearly, to the team. But you've got two veteran drivers in Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, who consistently either don't qualify well enough to place in the points, or their race pace of the car itself is so poor that it seems like they can never really get this a good level of consistency throughout a race and hold that long enough to score in the points. And it's kind of a shame, because I like the personality of all these guys. I like the drivers. I think they're solid veteran drivers. And it seems like it's the car that is letting them down. It's a car and a lack of consistency problem. Both these guys are out of a contract, if I remember correctly, at the end of this season. So we might see a very, very different lineup for Haas going into next season. Next, we have Mercedes. We're going to put Mercedes in A tier. They're not quite right at that level of S tier right now, I'd say, for the start of the season, as Red Bull and Aston Martin. And that said, Mercedes, over the last couple weeks since their big upgrades at Silverstone, at the British Grand Prix, have been outperforming Aston Martin. That said, I think Aston Martin just has that kind of surprise factor that's kind of leading me towards putting them in S tier. And for Mercedes, you've got, of course, one of the best drivers of all time in Lewis Hamilton, and a younger Brit in George Russell, who me and my friends, if you guys watch Dragon Ball, me and one of my friends compare him to Jiren. If you guys want to go look up, picture those two right next to each other, it's one of the funniest things. It's so just interesting, just goofy. Mercedes, they've had a lot of upgrades recently. Their car is improving. Their pace is improving. And as a result, their results are improving. They're getting better. They're getting better throughout the season. And it looks like they're likely to end up in second in the Constructors' Championship in points. Whereas with Aston Martin, early on in the season, you had Fernando Alonso scoring a ton of points and Lance Stroll not scoring many at all. And now you've got both Lewis Hamilton and George Russell pretty consistently landing in the points, which is likely to lead them to a second place in the Constructors' Championship by the end of the season. And with that said, there isn't a whole lot else going on with Mercedes right now. We're expecting them to have some more upgrades through the season, and we kind of just expect their pace to continue to improve as they clearly have been working very hard on their car. Next, we've got Ferrari. It just based on the brand, based on, it's Ferrari. It's the red livery, it's, the history. It almost pains me to put them below 4 other teams, which I guess that's a bit of a dead giveaway as to where I'm putting McLaren. But Ferrari's got 2 good drivers in Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, 2, in their prime drivers that clearly have the pace and the ability to put themselves in, the top 5, let alone just in the points. But there have just been so many team blunders throughout the season between poor pit stops. I mean, shoot, just 2 weeks ago we saw Charles Leclerc, not even with a penalty, end up with a 9-second pit stop. Team issue right there. I mean, and the strategy calls, just the overall mistakes with the team have been all over the place. And then, for Carlos Sainz, yes, we're seeing some consistent driving out of him, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of issues. We're seeing, plenty of these, I don't want to say discipline issues, but he is, just this past week, we saw him crash with Oscar Piastri. Both those 2 cars had to retire. And then with Carlos and the strategy of the team, they are clearly favoring Charles Leclerc, even in races where Sainz has the better pace. Just the team strategy is just all over the place. There's really not much more detail I can go into. It's just mind-boggling because the car should be good. The drivers are good. I don't understand how the team as a whole can just struggle so much throughout a full season. Last but not least, based on just how this list was written out, we have McLaren. And we are putting McLaren in A tier alongside Mercedes, and that's mostly based on their recent performances after the upgrades. McLaren started off the season pretty sluggish, pretty slow, towards the back end of the points or the back end of the pack. But as soon as they started pouring upgrades and money and resources into the car, you saw Lando Norris, their lead driver, and rookie Oscar Piastri absolutely take off. They have been incredible since these upgrades. We're seeing McLaren podiums. We're seeing, these very young drivers. I mean, Lando Norris, we talk about him like he's a veteran, and he's been in F1 for a couple years now. He's only like 23, 24. It is absolutely ridiculous. And Oscar Piastri, runaway Rookie of the Year. Not as though there's a ton of competition there for Rookie of the Year, but I think it is just an absolute runaway for Oscar Piastri to win Rookie of the Year. And I just truly expect McLaren to continue to perform well throughout the rest of the season, especially as more upgrades come along. To end the year, and I expect them to be a top 3 team by the end of the season in the Constructors' Championship. At the end of the day, I think it's pretty fair to say that Red Bull is far and away, they are just breezing by the competition, making it look easy, and this past weekend right before the summer break, I think is a prime example of that. You had Max Verstappen, the best driver on the grid right now, start out win pole position in qualifying, had to have a new gearbox put in, so that breaks Parc Ferme, and that incurs a grid penalty, 5 places. He starts in P6. He ends up winning the race by 22 seconds. Yeah, over his teammate, Sergio Perez, in the same car. Absolutely stunning. Just absolutely and truly ridiculous. But here's my tier list for the F1 grid currently right now at the start of the summer break. We will see how things go throughout the season. I will not be surprised if this is definitely not my last F1 video I put out for you guys. But with all that said, thank you so much for joining me on GR4 Sportsbar. Make sure, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure to head on over to the TikTok, also at GR4 Sportsbar, for more drink reviews and some stuff that I've done in the past. And if you're looking for more just pure sports content with me and a couple others, do not be surprised if I bring on some of those guys for an episode here or there. You know, I'm going to do it. They're going to be guests. Head on over to TBQ Sports on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, now part of the Bloodline Entertainment Network. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Cheers.